Hey everyone, it's Mark Zielinski, and it's time for Pannithor. There you go. That's what we're calling it, right, Wiki Dave?
Yeah, I think that's what we decided. I don't know. We'll make it. We decide based on the day what we're going to call it. We'll call it Pannithor today.
For today, yeah, there you go. Pannithor, the Pannithor edition, right? So something like that.
Yeah,
So
I mean, to be honest, like the Warpath lore, they don't have Pannithor, so I don't know why we go Pannithor, Pannithor, because essentially it's the same thing. So I think, yeah, we'll just go with Pannithor. I don't know. We'll talk about it every intro is us trying to work out what we're called. That's
there you go. Until somebody stops us. So
exactly. Until we get a complaint about it, we're going to keep doing it.
there you go. Or somebody will figure it out. Wisen us up a little bit, I guess.
I tell you what. We will stop doing it if someone comes with a theme song that helps us establish what we're called. So then we just play the theme song, and then we're all good.
That sounds like a great idea. So fantastic. So how are you doing?
Doing all right, surviving day by day. Been doing a lot of wiki stuff. I found a really cool thing that we'll mention in the news as well. But yeah, a lot of stuff to digest since our last episode, which we'll talk about in the news segment. But yeah, overall, I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself? How are you going?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. I'm very bummed I'm not at Adepticon, so I'm just kind of hanging in there waiting. So it'll all pay off in September when I head to the UK, though. So, but it's still very hard to be home and watching the Adepticon stuff go through. And I didn't get a chance to go to Mantic night, and they seem to have that on the first night of Adepticon. So it was kind of a surprise, it looks like. So, but
yeah, the FOMO is real, eh?
Oh, it's real. Well, they had a couple of Painted Champions companies there in the flesh for people to check out, and from what I heard, they're doing demos at the booth. So yeah, I think starting Saturday. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I mean the game, they start shipping it out next month. So, and which is, we're filming this on the 29th. So when you're listening to this, it will be April. So they are planning on shipping it in the month that we're in. So they're getting it out pretty quickly. So they've done a lot of legwork. They've got established. But we'll talk more about that, I guess, into the news. But it is a bit of FOMO missing out on Adepticon. Never been to one of those things myself. I mean, the closest I've been to is Gen Con. I went to Gen Con a few years ago. And that was like a huge experience for a little New Zealander. But yeah, I'm just seeing a lot of Halo releases. It really does feel like this is a big announcement day for a lot of tabletop games, but Mantic especially, and we're being able to see a lot of stuff. So it's really, really exciting. The books are out as well.
Oh, I was going to mention that. Yes, there's the books are out. I saw a picture of the Wing to Sar booth, and holy mackerel. And it was like, I think they're selling them for $15, and you get 10% off at the Mantic booth if you bought a book. Yeah. I'd be in a lot of trouble if I was there right now. So, but yeah, really cool. And they had a lot of books too. So, and Brandon said they were selling like hotcakes,
which I'm assuming sells a lot. I don't know. Hotcakes are pancakes, right?
Yes, they are. So
okay, just checking. All right. Well, anyway, before we beat around the bush anymore, we will go into the news. Now, I did get this set up, so this is going to be our news intro. Here we go.
It's time for the news.
There we go.
Perfect.
There we go. That's a little news segment for everyone. So we're going to do that every time we're doing the news. I don't have an outro, so we're just going to say, yeah, the news is over. So I haven't got that bit done yet.
Well, we just need an intro for the next segment. That's what we need, see? So
exactly. So I'll get there. Anyway, so the first thing, and we've already touched on it, and this is the big one, is the Kings of War Champions announcement. And so we got a massive dump of information. Now, I know Mark did an episode with Chris, and it's been a very popular and listened to episode here at MUP Studios, you could say. But Mark is going to be doing an ongoing series all about Kings of War Champions. That's right, Mark? I didn't get that wrong, did I?
No, you did not. MUP Champions is coming along, so very, very excited. As a matter of fact, I've got an episode recording this coming week, or next week, I should say. And I've got another one lined up for the end of April already, so everything's filling in. And yeah, we'll have some mutt people jumping in and out and things like that. And very, very excited about it. Lots of things coming up. And, maybe even some video content maybe hitting our YouTube page, considering things champions. So very, very
Yeah.
exciting. We're really ready for it. As a matter of fact, I went ahead and started the Kings of War Champions Fanatics page over on Facebook. So it is a private group, but just go ahead and ask and I'll let you in. So, but just check it out. So just Facebook, check it out, Kings of War Champions Fanatics, and everything gets posted on there. It's a fairly active community, and I'm actually very happy with the amount of traffic we get over there. But everything that you need to know about champions is posted there. So if it comes out, it's posted there. So check it out. It's your one-stop shop for everything champions.
And we'll put a link down below of this podcast for those that do want to check it out. But we also, we do have a MUP Champions Discord section as well, if you want to join there. So, Champions, this is all new, so it's going to be interesting to see how the game evolves, what gets introduced, how it changes. Any time when you introduce something new, it's all depends on how it hits and to see its life as well. So, and it's going to be, from what we have been told, it's going to be a very lore-heavy game. So, us being the lore team, we are going to be dissecting more of the lore side of it than the actual game side of it. So, over in Champions, Mark will probably talk about everything, but here we'll specifically talk about the lore aspect, because at the end of the day, that lore doesn't go if the game is successful or not. That lore typically sticks around, just like how Vanguard is a little bit faded away and Armada is a little bit faded away. That lore still exists, and it's still part of the ecosystem that is Pannithor. So we will be kind of dissecting that lore, and we got some really interesting lore drops as well just with this information. A lot of it just the hero names, but it also kind of points to a few things about the game that we've suspected. So first off, out of all the heroes, before I reveal any of them, which one for you, Mark, was the hero that you saw and you're like, that's really cool? Was there one that stood out to you?
Actually, the one I think is really cool is the Night Stalker one, because it's
the Void
unique.
Talon.
The Void Talon, because it's unique. It's a unit we don't have already, and so it's really cool. The Warband. I've got so many Night Stalker models. I've got so many butchers. It's unbelievable. So, but yeah. So I'm not buying it for the models that are surrounding the company, but I'm buying it for that champion because I really think that that's a cool model, and really because it's a Void Talon. It's something new, so that's why I really liked it. How about you, Dave? Which one leapt out at you?
The one that leapt out at me is actually the one that already has a history in the game that's already existed. So we'll go over before we go into that one, because there's a bit of a story to this one, and it has a bit of weight to it, so it'll be good as a discussion point. I'll cover everyone else first, and then I'll reveal the one and you probably already know the one I'm going to reveal, but we'll go through all of them. So we had the Bloody Cardinal, and that is the Forces of the Abyss. It looks like a big bloated lower abyssal. Actually, it sounds like more of an abyssal champion kind of category, but he looks like a very unique model. He kind of looks like the abyssals that warlocks kind of ride on, that particular model. We also got Grunk Blackclaw, and he is actually it looks like he has adapted one of those dwarf machines. What do they call them? Mine's escaping right now. What was the?
I want to say Ironclad, but I don't think that that's it. But yeah, he's got the armor suit. So
yeah, it's that armor suit that I can't for the life of me because it is. I think it's like 3 dwarfs have them. God, I'm going very quickly here. But anyway, we've got Grunt Blackclaw, which a goblin who looks like he fires little mastiffs from his little guns that he has there.
He's got maw pump launchers, where his hands are. So very very cool.
And then we've got what else we got? We've got Jordan Tallison. He's a dwarf for the Northern Alliance. And so he appears to have some kind of robot eagle. that he's based off the articles, the law articles that they released at the same time. It looks like he created that eagle himself. So that's interesting to see. He also has a second lieutenant, because I actually took snapshots of what they revealed on the Mantic website, and their lieutenant has a name. It's the one that's on the Frostclaw, called Brock Brockerson, and it looks like he is the lieutenant for Jordan. We also got Alanus Stalinus. I can't really say that. Alanus Stalinus. Does that sound about right? That's the right pronunciation, right?
Is that Solistus,
Basilean
I
one.
think. Yeah.
Solistus?
Alanus Solistus. Because it's Nias's great-granddaughter or something like that,
Yeah.
right? A granddaughter? Great-granddaughter? Yeah.
A great great niece.
Great
So
niece. There we go.
great niece. So that means it is his niece's child. So his brother's kid's kid, if that makes sense. So it might actually give us a good idea of the time period this actually takes place in, because Gannis is, he was, it didn't really specify how old he was, but he was a bit of an important player in Basilean lore, and he has been able to be a selectable unit on the table. So I'm thinking that the last kind of time zone we have was 3,868. That's the last definite time period that we know about, and that's when the Riftforged Orcs invaded the Shires. So I think we are looking around about 10 or 20 years after that, which is quite interesting to think about, of like how much time has actually progressed in the world. So I'm thinking it's around, we'll think about it's what, 3,880, I think, about 20 years after, which is, interesting, because the novels that are happening right now take place around the time of the Storm of the Shires. Actually, some of the novels like Honor's Price and Pride of the King take place before that actually time period. So it's quite interesting to see where the novels are in terms of time period, and where 4th edition / champions are going to be as well. I think we're going to be a little bit all over the place in terms of the lore that we're going to be getting. So it'll be interesting to see if they kind of all match up. But yeah, that was a really cool reveal of showing a character that is related to a character we saw in the past. So that's all we know so far, except for the last character. And you know the last character, don't you there, Mark?
The last character? Are you talking about our little Twilightkin hero?
Yes, Lethal Voidheart, as she's called now. She used to be called Lethal Silverheart. That's when she was with the Owls before she got fully corrupted, and then she became Lethal Bleakheart, and you could also use her in League of Infamy. And now she is Lethal Voidheart, and it looks like it's a follow-on from the short stories that came out last year. I think it was last year or the year before, with Shadow Horizons, because the last knowledge we had about Lethal was that she actually was sent into the void, kind of a little bit like exiled a little bit, shoved into the void and told to wait until she had certain visitors arrive. So that was the last information we actually got about her. And she's been one of those characters, I mean, we first kind of saw her in The Edge of the Abyss. This was during 2nd edition. So she has carried on through all this, and having her own story and stories throughout all this time. And it's really cool to see her return to the world of Pannithor. And as a bit of a kind of a celebration for my own knowledge, I have actually built out her page on the wiki. And we'll have all her history there. We also have found what we call a lost story. So I've been talking to Rob Berman. He mentioned he actually wrote a bit of history about Lethal, about, around that time where she was captured by the Elves and then she eventually became Bleakheart. He actually wrote a story, and we found out that it wasn't actually ever published on the Mantic website. It was actually sent out by a newsletter, but that newsletter was only sent out in 2023 and kind of was a little bit of lost media because no one really, documented or had another place that newbies like myself could actually find. So what I actually did is I got Rob to send me that email. I've actually uploaded it to the wiki, so now you can actually look at it yourself. I'll put a link below in this chat. Not on this chat, sorry, in the description of the podcast. But it's now fully archived on the website, and you can look it up and actually goes into Lethal's uncle, who actually played a big part of why she ended up being twisted to the void. For a bit of spoilers, it turns out she was trying to bring back her aunt who died before she was actually born, and so that kind of twisted her mind. He had already been diving into the void, and essentially she surpassed what he could ever imagined, and she became the Lothal that we knew. And so there's a lot more lore, and even Rob said there's characters from that story that will reappear in Champions, because obviously he wrote Champions, but he also wrote this short story. So it'll be really cool if you are interested in Lothal Voidheart. Look it up on the wiki, read that short story for yourself, come up with your own interpretation, and before you actually get it, so you can get invested in the lore a little bit more. That was a lot.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, Champions is going to be very lore heavy, so we're very excited about it. And the other thing is, I love the way Rob Berman writes. There's just something about his stories and the way that he writes, because he knows Kings of War. He played it. He helped design certain parts of it. He wrote Ascent of the Goblin King, and I don't know. That's my favorite novel. I love the way he writes. He's written great stories for Firefight and all that kind of stuff, and Dead Zone, and you get those nice sci-fi, so he can write both of them. But I don't know, there's just something about the way that Rob writes. So tip of the hat to you, Rob. Fantastic stuff. I love it, and I'm looking forward to your next novel whenever you find time to write it.
Yeah, and I'm excited as well, and I think there's also a lot of kind of hints at the past as well. We're seeing Alanis being a throwback to old characters. I think Grunk is a good throwback to Leo the Iron Goblin, which is actually an old character that is the same kind of character as Grunk, is that a goblin that's in an iron machine and kind of like storming through, and I don't know if he was shooting mastiffs at the time, but he essentially was running a big machine. So it's good to see a little bit kind of it's familiar but unfamiliar stuff coming in, and we're excited about what's coming up. So get invested. There's also, we found out, Captain Grimdance, that was one of her lieutenants. The same with Brockrisson was for Jordan. Captain Grimdance was there as well, which I don't know if they will go into the lore of their lieutenants or of their particular companies. I hope they kind of do bring a little bit more personalization to it. It'll be interesting to see, but we won't know until we got hot little hands on that information there, which, as we said before, comes out in April. Oh, that was a lot. Yeah. So that's what we know so far.
Looks like it's an iron juggernaut for the goblin suit, and which is iron exciting. A juggernaut. And I also, each of the units has its own name and history and everything. So I think we're going to be getting tons and tons of lore that we're going to be able to sink our teeth into. So, it's going to be
the speculation. Great. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. And I think the speculation that we've seen so far of the teasers, it's quite clear that we'll be getting an ogre company as well. There was a bit of screenshots of the model, and you saw a crocodile, like a crocodile dog kind of type of creature, but you could see the person holding it definitely clearly had ogre skin. So I think we're going to be getting ogres. I also think we're going to be halflings, mainly because we also got clippets on Facebook of the Primovator Pilgrim, which is a fake newspaper that they actually have used in the past. They did it for Armada, and they did it for the League of Infamy. And it's kind of like just like a newspaper of showing, big events and so forth. And they revealed 3 newspaper pages, and all the factions were covered except for really one. It did imply that the Night Stalkers, so the Void Talon, were the ones attacking the halflings, but it noted the halflings were defending the orchards of Buckton. So, but they made a big point that was the halflings doing it. So I think we're going to get a halfling faction as well. So ogres, halflings, and there was one more that was supposedly getting, and based off the fuzzy view that we have on the screenshot, there's a lot of blue. So my best guess is Trident Realm, because there's a lot of blue sticking out, and normally that kind of blue kind of goes with the Twilight Kin or the Night Stalkers, which we've already got. So it kind of, through the process of elimination, the only one that kind of is left, I think, is the Twilight. Oh, sorry, not Twilight. Sorry, the the
Trident realm.
Trident realm. So that's my best guess, but I mean it's quite hard to diagnose off a fuzzy image. But Trident realm just seems like the best guess out of a hard like limited information. What do you think there, Mark?
Well, I think you're right on. It's definitely Trident Realms. I mean, you go back and you take a look at all the companies, and a lot of them are their best plastics. What they consider their best plastics. So I would, the one that I'm surprised we didn't see was the Ratkin. So I was kind of surprised that we didn't see them. Maybe it's because there was a resin model. It's the only ambush set that has a resin model in it. And so maybe it was just too limited with the plastics. It didn't give them enough, units or something like that, enough variety. So they didn't do it. But I thought that, the Ratkin are pretty good models. And I think that they should have got in there. But overall, if you take a look at it, they are their best plastics, if you think about it. So halflings, ogres, the ones that aren't new, but then again, Trident Realm's got a brand new ambush box at the beginning of last year. So, we could be seeing some more frogs. I have got so many frogs between
that. That seems like everyone's thing is frogs.
Yeah, I've got frogs upon frogs. I mean, it would be a great time for me to see some new plastics released, and, will we see that? I doubt it, but, it'd be neat if everything got released in Champions and then rolled up to Kings of War. That would be really cool, because the Champions are supposed to roll up. Yeah, the Champions are supposed to roll up to Kings of War. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people wanting, placiderms, so many other Trident realm species that really just haven't got the love yet. And a lot of people are begging for it. But it kind of adds, when now you mentioned Kings of War, it kind of adds to, these factions are kind of being confirmed for 4th edition. It would be a very foolish move for them to introduce these into Champions and then not have them in 4th edition. So I'm starting to think we're starting to see the lineup of what is actually going to survive. What we believe the culling, we've heard rumors, nothing's confirmed until it's confirmed, but it seems like that's the direction that they want to focus more on, the cutting down the more competitive, cutting down the options in terms of factions and make the game a little bit more competitive and a bit easier. But it also detracts from a lot of the, you could say, dirty casuals, the people that don't go to these tournaments, that they can't get the faction that they want, or they have to no longer be able to play the faction that they want to play. So I think we're starting to see that, and it's going to be interesting to see which factions kind of survive. But if you do collect any of the factions that are part of Champions, you probably are in the side of your faction's not going to vanish. Would you say that as well, Mark? That's my feelings on it anyway.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, it was very fascinating, and we can bring up Matt Carmack's post on Fanatics here. Somebody asked.
I didn't know if you wanted to go down that route, but all right.
Yeah, I'm going to. So, but somebody asked, "Hey, I'm getting into Kings of War. Should I buy an army? Now, or should I wait till 4th edition?" And everybody's like, jump in. And Matt jumped in and said that 4th edition is on its way soon. TM. So, and that was in quotes. It's important to note that armies Mantic makes models for are the ones that are safer to invest in than those that do not have Mantic models. Even as if the army changes, those models will be 99% likely to still be compatible. Units that do not have Mantic model support do not have the same level of guarantee. Everything related to release date or new/remove factions is under strict NDA. Anyone giving you an answer here is only guessing.
And that's what we don't.
There
we don't
you
know
go.
Yeah, we
and
don't.
That's
know
on the rules committee. So
yeah. So we don't know. Well, I mean, obviously, we've got friends. We've got people that we know, friends that are in the rules committee, but we do not probe them information because we would never put them in that position. Now, we do hear rumors. We watch conversations taking place on Facebook, on Reddit, and all of that. And the impression is most people are assuming that factions are going to be removed. And I think a lot of people are getting nervous about Is their faction going to be removed? Now, me and Mark, we both have said this on the record. We don't want any faction removed. We think we say it from a lore point of view, say it from a hobbyist point of view. I also say it from someone that collected fantasy battles for so long, of feeling restricted and not being able to pick the army that I want to pick. And we live in a world that we like our options. We like seeing a world evolve, and to be able to see a really cool new army and feel safe that that's not going to be removed. The next edition, which is sadly some abuse that we've been given through in the tabletop community, is just having models all of a sudden not being able to be used, and I think a lot of people are getting nervous about it. I think them saying that if they don't have an official model, like mammoths, like if we say mammoths don't have an official model, does that mean that Liga Roidina is going to be removed? Is that going to be the Kingdoms of Men going to remove, which is less likely? But I mean, it's those kind of factions like the League of Roidina, the Order of the Green Lady, the Order of the Brotherhood. Brother Marks, I should say. All of those are at risk of just vanishing, and it seems a bit I wouldn't say unfair that if those factions are going to be removed, say it now. Say it now, so people aren't going to invest into those armies, or at least start doing a little bit of groundwork, because people have put a lot of time in these armies, and if they're just not going to be able to use them on the table anymore, the excuse of you can use it in this army instead doesn't really sit right, because I mean they have gravitated towards these factions. They haven't gravitated. I mean, especially if you're casual like myself, who doesn't go to tournaments, that likes to play it, to play, or they like to collect and not have massive things, but just like to build the army that they want. I do think that there needs to be a little bit of clarity. If factions are going to be removed, say it, because the only one that loses is the customer. So, and that's the most important person when you're doing a new edition, is how the customer feels towards the game after the new edition comes out. Because the new edition should be enhancing the game. It should not be detracting from it. And if you're removing factions that people have put a lot of time into, it's going to feel more of a detraction than anything positive or addition, if that makes sense. I don't know if that ramble made sense. I kind of went on a bit of a rant. What's your impressions there, Mark?
No, it makes sense. I really don't want to see any factions go. I get it. If they do go, I want to see it done in lore that makes sense. I still feel the loss of the Brotherhood so deeply, and it got split into two factions and the whole 9 yards. I'm still angry about it, to be honest with you. That was my favorite faction, and it got blown up. So, but then again, I'm still here and I'm still playing Kings of War, and I didn't rage quit and burn any models. So
yeah,
but but that's me. So, but I don't want to see them go, but this is a good hint. I mean, if you don't have Mantic models for your faction, well, then I guess you should be looking twice at your models, but in your army. One of the other things to note too is that, and I've got to have Matthias on, so Kodos to talk about it, but he found a way to use all Mantic models to create every army, so which is just awesome. So we got to have to do that. So hopefully that means we can save every army, because they can all be built with Mantic models. So,
yeah, I mean that's the excuse. You can use every single Mantic model that's there. You could go on the website and you could figure out something for every faction. That's no problem. I think what Matt's saying here is, if there's a model not specifically for that faction, it's at risk of not being able to be used anymore. So I think dwarves are okay, because there are certain berserker lords and stuff that are specifically used for free dwarves. But Order of the Green Lady, there is no specific model that's only for the Order of the Green Lady. And I think that's kind of what he's hinting at. Because I don't think the order of those two factions, the Brother Mark or the Green Lady, I don't think they're going to survive. I think it's been a bit of a hint that they're going to be killed. I love their origin stories. If you've read Nature's Night and some of the short stories in Edge of the Abyss compilation, the story is there of those factions. They do have lore associated with them. So for them to get rid of that, it's a bit disappointing, but at the end of the day, we don't know. This is all speculation. And again, this is where I think the reassurance needs to come in, especially if I think the rumors about 4th edition are rising. and the people hearing the reports that factions will be culled is rising too, because that seems to be on every single post on it, is that kind of dialogue. You could go in there and try and calm people down. At the end of the day, that's going to be in their mind, and like, should I spend $100 of my dollars on this army if I can't use it? Because they've gone through that with other companies. GW, as much as we hate saying it, GW has done that historically, even recently, of just saying these factions are no longer can be played. End of story. Your models are no longer can be played on the table. So that's what people are worried about. And from a law point of view, if it makes sense, it makes sense. But also, people love their lore part of their armies as well, and just it will be a pity to lose a lot of interest in players for something as just something they could have been eased into instead of just struck with, you could say. But hey, that's why we're here to try and make sense of it.
Absolutely, yeah. I know some people are all about rip the Band-Aid off, blah blah blah. Be bold, and it's like, well, just don't screw it up. I guess on one hand, if they really mess up 4th edition, I got champions to play, but
exactly, yeah. and no one's stopping you playing 3rd edition, so no one's stopping you to playing old editions, which a lot of people in the Warhammer world, if you look at Morheim, if people want to keep playing the game, they will still keep playing the game, but it's just a little bit of a sore spot. And I think a very good example is Dungeons and Dragons, when they tried to introduce the 3rd edition, and that just went down like a lead balloon, and then people went over to, was it 3rd edition? Or was it 2.5?
Well, I mean, if you're getting up to date, they released the brand new 50th edition 2025 version, and boy, there's a lot of upset in the D&D world about that. Like, orcs are not in the monster manual anymore. I think they're player characters now. So, I mean, the outrage. I know. I see it here where people are just like, nope, I'm playing 5th. My brother, his group, they all play edition 3.5.
That's the one. I think it was 4th edition when they released it, and everyone's like, nope, don't
they
want that. And
hated 4th edition.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And we don't want that. I mean, you saw that with Warhammer. People didn't like Sigma, and that's why we got to play things like Kings of War. And so you don't want to be that, and you want to be reactive, not reactive, but you want to try and include as many different areas of the hobby as possible. So we don't want to lose any factions. We're kind of resigned to the fact we will. And my message, if Mantic is listening to this, all help rip the Band-Aid off, and don't just tell us what's there and what's not there. Just kind of start leading into it and saying, hey, these factions are not going to be around, or short stories to kind of imply what's happening to them. Like you kind of did with Edge of the Abyss. You kind of showed the Brotherhood breaking up, and there was a bit of a campaign and story to it. So we'll see. There's still probably a year away, but it'll be interesting.
Well, I've seen speculation for early 2026, and that's because rumor is we're not getting a annual update, the Clash of Kings pack at the end of the year. So if that's the case, that is probably, because that is always the season ender kind of thing. That's where we go into our new tournament season. So if that doesn't exist, I mean, 4th has got to be hot in the heels, and traditionally Mantic has an early year release. So, so that probably will fit into that slot. So that is the hot speculation right now, early 2026. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll get more information, and I just worry that they'll leave it until it's eaten a little bit of the community. But we'll see. We'll be optimistic and hope we get more information sooner rather than later. And on the last of the news, we will. So we mentioned that new books, so you can actually pre-order those books, such as Through Thick and Thin, which is a sequel to Pious, written by Mark Barber, and also Claws on a Plane. So you can pre-order those. Actually, I think you can just order Through Thick and Thin now on the Winged Hussar website. So go in there and get those books if you are interested. And we also had the announcement of Last Light, which is actually the fourth book in Mark Barber's series. I think it started with Steps of Deliverance, which was actually the first book of all these new book kind of starting to be published and so forth. And so we got Steps of Deliverance, and then we got Heroes Falling and Faith Aligned, and those are kind of sequels that take place at the same time, those two. And then it comes back together, those two stories come back together for Last Light, which is, I think, coming out later this year. I'm not sure of the exact timeline. But it's a bit of a shout out to Mark Barber. He's such a trooper to the community as large. He loves the community, Basileans specifically, and he's written the most books. I mean, of Pannithor. So yeah, look out for that one. Hopefully soon. We'll have him on when we come closer to possibly the release date of Last Light. But yeah, just keep an eye out for that. I've put the artwork on the wiki if anyone's interested.
That's awesome. That is the best book cover yet. I love it. Mm. And the second I looked at that, it's like, okay, we need models of Estelle and Orion. It's got to happen. We need them. So I think, folks, if you have seen that cover or you'd like to see models of your favorite Wing to Sar characters, Ronnie Renton at manticgames.com. Send Ronnie a message. Send the people over at Mantic, a note and just say, yeah, we need models for this. Even if they release them as, STLs or something like that on the vault, I still think that would be really cool. Like they did a Carmack specialty STL model that you could buy direct off the website. And, it was a fundraiser for Matt when he got hurt. Yeah. So, but, really cool. It would be really nice to see our favorite characters from the Wing to Sar novels, being able to be used on the table, even if you just used them as a hero or a champion or something like that. But that would be really cool.
Yeah, and you could have Pius as well, and that would be a good Armada edition. Actually, Mark gave some instructions how to make Pius, the ship. And I've actually documented that on the wiki as well, if anyone is interested. So you can actually make a Pius yourself, which is just a conversion of a Eole class ship. Butchering the pronunciation. But yeah, but I mean that's easy enough to make an STL out of as well. All they need to take it is take what he's done there and just make it a bit easier for him in the 3D model it. I really hope they do invest more. I would love the fact that you could actually buy the book and the STL as a package. That would be really cool. Of like, I'm going to buy this book, but I also get an STL with it as well. That way you're supporting the author, supporting the work, and also getting an STL you can print off yourself. So, and on that note of STLs, we'll go into the April Vault, which is actually more Twilight Kin releases. So if you do like your Twilight Kin, you can actually go on the Vault this month and get it. But also 2 League of Infamy Kickstarter characters that came out a very long time ago. It was the Bosun and Garka the Rowdy. Those are now actually available for STLs as well. And they came out with a catalog. I don't know if you noticed this, Mark, but they've actually released a catalog, a search catalog called Library on the Vault. So you can go to Library, select the faction that you want, and actually just come up with whatever faction you're looking for.
I did not notice that. That is really, really interesting. I'm definitely going to have to check that out. And yeah, the big thing about the release for me, for the Vault for April, is that I can get all the Twilight Kin characters for the last module that they have for Dungeon Saga Origins, because I shipped most of them off to Jeremy for him to do his Twilight Kin army. So I'm short, and I was waiting for him to get released in a pack, and so now I can print the ones that I'm missing. So that is really good. Mark is very happy. So I'm very happy about the April release. So, and with those characters, with the Bosun, and who's the other character? I don't remember him.
Garkin the Rowdy. Garka the Rowdy. It's actually a she. It's an orc.
Okay. Oh, it's an orc. I thought it looked like an ogre to me. So.
No, there was an ogre who has a peg leg. That's the Bosun. And then you got Garka the Rowdy, which is a female orc. Not a lot of lore around it. I have obviously documented it on the wiki. It's just one of those characters that they kind of threw in there as part of like a Kickstarter that, if you pay enough, you get those characters as well. It's unlike Dungeon Saga. Dungeon Saga with time, and I'll throw in Mark Barber's name here, he really expanded on those characters that were added in addition when they did the original Dungeon Saga Kickstarter. They introduced some characters, didn't have a lot of lore to them, and then Mark Barber took those characters and actually expanded on them for, I think, Hero Fallen especially. We got a lot of those characters being expanded on, and which is really cool, but we haven't seen that since. We haven't really seen that for League of Infamy, which was actually always intended to get its own book. It never did, but there was a book being written at the time, which looks like it fell off to the side, about the League of Infamy. But also we didn't, for Dungeon Saga Origins, we haven't really had those additional characters that were added any elaboration on them. So I hope we do see, I hope Mantic goes, hey, these characters deserve their own stories. Doesn't have to be world-ending stories. They can just be side stories. Give them reach out to Wing Hussar and go, hey, these characters, do something with them, and then people can run with it, because based off the timeline and when everything takes place, especially with Origins, because Origins takes place like a year or two before the original Dungeon Saga. So in this current timeline, those characters might not actually be alive if you look at the ages of them. So they could actually explore and actually do something with them as well. So it's cool that we're getting to be able to play them on the table, though. It's really exciting to see.
Yeah, the other exciting thing about the vault is the Crocodog. So you'll have him, so I can print up multiples of that, which will be very cool. I'm not big on the Mastodon, but those are in there. And then we got the Cyber Lizard. I guess he's in the Dead Zone faction. So he's in one of the armies for that. Yeah. So everybody's excited about the Cyber Lachilodon, which is very interesting. And then it looks like they got the extra parts for the Mikael model, so that you can convert him into the other form of him, which I don't know what that is off the top of my head. So, but very cool. Yeah. And then, of course, that's a Shadow Hound I think I see in there. So very exciting about that. And so who needs a bunch of little chaff dogs? So perfect.
Yeah. I think it's really good to see, one, that they finally added that library function. I think it's great for people that are looking specifically for stuff for their own faction, but also good to see them introducing stuff that we probably never would see, because when League of Infamy was created, I think it was before the time they had files for STLs and so forth. So seeing these get recreated is pointing that we may get some of these older heroes come through, but also gives a really good example why they should be putting some Wing Hussar kind of characters on there as well, making models, putting them on here, having X amount go to the writer, because so many creatives nowadays are missing out because of AI and so forth, and being able to set up those positive purchases for creatives like writers is really good to show goodwill, and also encourages people, because people are more likely to buy something if they know there's going to be something benefiting someone that they like and someone that they're very passionate about. So if you really like the books, you want to support the author a little bit more, you can't just keep on buying the same book over and over again. Well, you could, but there's a limit to it. But if you have an STE model for $5 that like 10% of them is going to go to the writer or something like that, you're more likely to do it. And it helps the whole ecosystem of the creative community as well. So you never know what they could do with it. There's so many different avenues they could explore with the vault. I'm just glad finally there's been some kind of improvement to it, because for a long time a lot of people were getting very itchy feet on it of nothing's changing. It's becoming a bit of a drain on the bank account, and it's good to see a little bit more investment there.
Oh, absolutely. Boy, this library is really cool. You can search by full model and upgrade, and between the game that you want to put in there, and you can even do it by faction if you want. So you could do Kings of War, Fantasy, Riftforge Orcs, full models. Let's see if we got anything. Oh, there we go. We got Hellstriker, Stormbringer on Winged Slasher, Riftforge Orc, Thunderseer 1, 2, and 3. So there you go. There's your full model. So that's pretty cool. And then you can hit model upgrades. Let's see what we got there. Oh, they got upgrades for the Storm Giant, and then the Riftforge Orcs infantry upgrades. Hey, that's from the very first pack. I remember that. So those are some arms. Very, very cool.
The only complaint that I have, and that's only because I'm annoying, is that they spelt Pathfinder wrong. They spelled it with an extra TH. At the end of Path, they go PATHTH Finder. Do you notice that?
Well, we'll have to get that fixed. So there you go. Elliot,
Yeah, I don't
Cleric,
know.
either one of you hear it, there you go. You can get that
There you
taken
go.
care of. So,
I'm sure it'll be fixed by the time. It's a fairly new thing. I'm sure they'll be made aware at least, and it'll be fixed up. But really, really good move. Very good and very positive because the vault is such a good resource, hopefully revenue resource for them, but a really good resource for model collectors or army builders. But they expanding it on little things like this really does help the longevity and bring some more credibility because it was so difficult to find what you wanted there. So that's cool. All right, so I think that's all the news there. Have you got anything else there, Mark, that you want to go into? But we don't have an outro, so this will be the outro.
There you go. Well, even if I did, I think we need to move along. So
yeah, all right, cool. All right, so this week we're going to be talking to what some people dub the Age of Ice, but it's more commonly known as Winter's War. Now, Winter's War, when I first heard it, I thought it was a war during winter. But no, it was after finding out a little bit about the lore, it actually turns out Winter was a wicked one who created essentially an ice over for 150 years and essentially created a war between the noble races and her own forces there. Was that your understanding, Mark? What's your feelings on when it comes to Winter War before we get into the nuts and bolts of it all?
well, for me, it's the period of time I want to know more about. It's surprising how little we have on it, actually, and it just has always captured my imagination with it, because, I mean, that's how Pannithor, as it exists today, was kind of formed by the end of the war with Winter. So, or Winter's War, as I like to say. But I really think that it's a real cool period of time. I think it's a part of the lore that deserves a lot of exploration. That's just me. I don't know. It's always just kind of captured my imagination just talking about it. I don't know why I think she's such a cool character and, the whole thing. So, but yeah, very, very cool. And so I'd really like to get more about it. So that's a little bit how we got to this place today to kind of talk about the Winter War or the War with Winter. Whatever you want to call it.
Because I mean, we've been kind of going through every faction, but at the end of the day, factions only go so far. So we're going to talk more about events as well. So if you have any events you want us to cover, maybe even just go for the entire timeline of Pannithor that we know in a real kind of speed run kind of version, we'll definitely do that. So we'll start to throw in more bigger deep dives into events like the Winter's War. So the Winter's War went on for 150 years. Now, to compare that to the God War that happened, so the God War was 170 years. So the God War went from year negative 170 to the year 0, and this Winter's War actually went from the year 2499 until the year 2649. Roughly, it's because of the lore being so disjointed a little bit, the settling on exactly when this occurred can be a bit tricky, but that's what I've kind of narrowed it down to based off the information I have there. So that's 2,499 years after the end of the God War. Now, when there's been different versions of the Winter's War about what actually occurred. So what we're going to do is we're going to go specifically what was written in the Green Book. However, there was actually more elaborated on in Clash of Kings 2024. So we're going to use a mix of this information. Now, the reason why I'm saying that straight off the bat is it actually affects the origins of the Winter's War. So a lot of people believe Winter's War occurred because the Wicked One of Winter, after all the Wicked Ones were shoved down into the abyss, it is said that somehow Winter escaped the abyss and caused this particular incident. However, in the Clash of Kings 2024, it's actually stated that she just never actually participated in the God War. So she deserted Oscan after the Wicked Ones and the Shining Ones were created, and it sounds like just before the war broke out, so the mirror smashed. They all kind of were split into the Wicked Ones and the Shining Ones, and as the tensions were brewing between the two newly established factions, Winter deserted Oscan and kind of hid up north. and she hid up north, kind of biding her time. So she actually played no part in the God War whatsoever. So that was a bit of a change in the Clash of Kings 2024 story. So she didn't just escape the Abyss, she was never in the Abyss to begin with. Was that your understanding, Mark? Because that was a surprise to me while I was going through this.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by that too. So, do you know her Shining One aspect is? Does
Now,
she
that's a
have
bit of
one?
a rumor. Now, I have
Yeah.
found out some information about what the Shining One may be called, but we do know the Celestian version is the Ice Maiden Shakara. Now she is, in the Rise of Celestian, she is there, and she is known as, an ice kind of magic based person. So it would make sense for Winter to be part of it. There are rumors that her the Winter's Shining One is Aurora, like the Aurora Borealis, that word. And that sounds right to me, but there's nothing I've found, at least, that confirms that that's what actually the Shining One is called. It was just on the wiki before my time, and it's just left there. And until I find otherwise, it feels right. It feels like that's her name, but she is somewhere up north, and it is hinted in one of the short stories in The Edge of the Abyss. I think it's called Winter's, or memory serves me right, Winter's something. Winter's, I'm going to have to look it up. But it's hinted that she was one of the mysterious voices that was talking to one of the characters there. I can't remember the top of my head. I've been put under the spot, so I'm scrambling a little bit. But yeah, I think it's Aurora. And that makes sense. I'm going to call her Aurora until otherwise specified. But she plays no part in the story of the Winter's War, at least from the information that we know. It could be she was in prison and we just didn't know about it.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very cool. So, but yeah.
Crimson
So,
Winter, that's the story. Yeah.
Crimson Winter.
Yeah, that's the short story that's in The Edge of the Abyss.
Oh, very cool. I'm going to have to go look that up. So, very, very cool. I don't remember that one.
Yeah, it's I think it's near the end of it. It's actually written by Brandon Rospond. So he actually wrote that one. And it has hints at it. I don't know how much weight that canon is. It's a bit messy, the short stories in Edge of the Abyss, because so much has changed. But, it kind of hints at that anyway. So, anyway, just to go back into Winter's War. So Winter essentially went up north, God War happened, and she just bided her time for about 2,499 years. Why she waited 2,499 years? Not 100% sure on that one. It's not really clear why she did, but she waited, and her grand plan was to essentially cover the world of Pannithor in ice, and essentially just kind of freeze out everybody and kill all living things, basically, as a Wicked One tends to do. It's not 100% clear, again, that was her intention. That's kind of how it's all written, is that was her grand plan. So in the year 2499, the winter kind of fell upon the land. People didn't really know why. It just felt a little bit unnatural. I mean, the Mammoth Steppes kind of expanded a bit because the sea up to the north became ice, so it started to get a little bit big, but then everything froze over, so the land became unable to grow anything, and the seas kind of withdrew and became ice, and then everything was kind of just being poisoned by the salt and everything, and just everything was started to die and freeze over. Eventually, the elves kind of figured out what was going on and determined that they found out it was winter. It's not clear how they found out. They just found out that winter was freezing over the land and essentially causing everything to actually happen, or everything to freeze over. So what happened is the noble races, so that's men, dwarf, and elves, they kind of came together and they fought against the uprising of Winter's forces. So we're only just talking about Winter's forces. All the other Wicked Ones are still shoved in the Abyss. So Winter kind of gathered ice demons and ice giants and a lot of things up north. And I believe it's hinted that a lot of the Vargar kind of sided with her too. So she used their forces to actually attack the men, dwarf, and elves. And we found out a lot of that reasoning why in Rise of the Celestians, or why the Vargar were a little bit pissed off at all those noble races. And they essentially a big war broke out between the two sides. So a lot of ice. It was basically, winter is coming, but just Pannithor style. So after, when the wars start happen, you think, where are the Shining Ones? Because the Shining Ones are still on the surface. Now, this is where things get a little bit confusing. So the Shining Ones couldn't help. They were very erratic from being essentially depowered after the God War. Now, you would think after 2,499 years, they would get over it, but they didn't. And so it looks like they were very hesitant to help. They were very, they didn't want to lose any more power, and it sounds like they were very demoralized and they just didn't want to help the Pannithor races, whether it was just the fact that they just didn't care anymore, that they were still adjusting to everything. They were very unfocused, and ever since the God War, they just didn't care. And that's quite interesting when you read through the story. You think the Shining Ones, based on how it is now in modern time for Pannithor, they all revered and loved and all that stuff. But it actually turns out during the Winter War, they kind of abandoned the noble races, except for one, and that was Valador the Great. And Valador is a very important Celestian and Shining One, and his wicked one is Belial, who, according to the story, he actually kind of managed to lock away, so it's just him. So he was actually the only Shining One that actually helped the noble races, and it was often said that he was everywhere. So he helped, he fought shoulder to shoulder with the Owls against the ice giants that came down from the north. He'd also helped command garrisons at Sathoi, Sathoi. Sathoi? Is that how you say that?
Close enough.
Close enough, there you go. And he repelled thousands of ice sprites from that garrison, and he was just fighting everywhere. It was pretty much a stretch to the thin. And he also helped the bulwarks at Dolgarth, which is the dwarven capital at the time, against the encroaching glaciers that were essentially about to take over the capital city of the dwarfs, which is actually quite important because Dolgarth is where Dungeon Saga actually takes place. The first campaign, Dungeon Saga, the Dwarf King's Quest, that's actually where you get the Tome of Valdor. So that's kind of the link there. So that's probably when he left that tome, left those artifacts there. And it was around about, after the Age of Ice is when Dolgarth actually got abandoned. So it's worth noting that it's around this time where that stopped being the capital. But I think it was still the capital until a little bit after the war. So that's worth noting. But basically, Valdor was basically everywhere, and it's the reason why the noble races held out so much. Valdor knew he had to do all these things because he needed time. He needed to somehow draw out Winter so he could face her one-to-one and end the war. But he knew if he just left her to overrun the force, all the forces of good, Winter would never become desperate enough to come out of the shadows and fight him one-on-one. So that's why he was essentially everywhere. So over the time of the 150 long years, there were a couple other pockets of resistance. So the Ice Elves in the Bitterlands, they remained there even after Winter kind of took over everywhere to the east and to the south, and they managed to kind of hold her back quite successfully. Also, the Sylvian King and the Sylvian kindred in the forest of Gallagher with the Green Lady managed to hold back the ice enough and actually keep the forest alive. So if you look at the old map of the historic Pannithor, so this is in the Green Book, you can also find it in the free PDF you can get online. You'll notice the old map, and you'll notice that the Gallia, it's called, the forest of Gallia is called Gallia the Great, and so the forest was a lot bigger, and it was actually a lot smaller after this event, but it's only because the Sylvan King managed to hold out and keep these trees alive. So for 300 years, they managed to put the trees to sleep, put them in a bit of a hibernation state, and just keep them alive until the end of the war. So there were little pockets of resistance there, but ultimately Winter was pretty much owning everything by just freezing everyone to death, essentially. So far, do I make sense, Mark? I throw it to you mainly so I get a breath, but also I would like your opinion as I go.
Oh, no, it's very cool. So, and just a little side note, Valandor and Vial, they actually have models, and they're from the original Dungeon Saga. So they each had their own little module, and it's been a while, so I have them here somewhere. But, Yeah, so they had their own little module and everything. So very, very cool.
And we'll go
So
into that at the end what those are, because there's a particular thing that happens soon that makes you wonder, well, how can they have a model? But we'll go over that in a sec. But yeah, you're
there
very
we
very
go.
right, and you're definitely on the right track of what I want to hit. So after this
Foreshadowing. Yeah. The other
your
thing too, before
foreshadowing
we
is
move
very
on.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
a very good
So the other
foreshadow.
thing is we got some new kind of units and things like that. Ice sprites,
Correct.
ice elves,
Ice
the ice
demons.
giants.
I don't know what ice demons are, but that's what it says in the book.
Yeah. So I mean, so very interesting part of time, that's got some new units and stuff. So very, very cool.
Well,
And for some reason, we like the North because, we had all this stuff going on with Chill and the Northern Alliance and everything else. So this is kind of that same wintry vibe. So,
yeah, exactly. I mean, ice giants. There's two kind of giants, and we'll touch on this just because we're here. We've got frost giants and you've got ice giants. Now, I had always thought they were one and the same, but the more I looked into it, the more I realized ice giants are actually just massive frost giants. So they are essentially two species, and one of them is it's like the difference between a human and a dwarf kind of thing. So the dwarf is the frost giant, and the ice giant is the human, which is massively big. And there is actually the last ice giant. I think it's Hurum, who actually not works. You can have in the Northern Alliance army, and he's known as the legendary ice giant, rather than frost giants. So from my interpretation of the lore, could be completely wrong, is ice giants and frost giants are two different things, and ice giants got wiped out during this war, probably thanks to Valandor and his resistance against it. But all the ice giants essentially just got killed up, and now we're just getting the frost giants, who are actually a little bit smaller. So that's quite worth noting as well, because I mean, if you think about, hey, I want to build a scenario based off the Winter's War. If you're going to use frost giants, they're massive. Or you want to use ice giants, they're massive, and that might help add a little bit of kind of unique kind of flavor to the table, if that makes sense.
yep, very, very cool. All right, our
All
story
right.
continues.
Yeah, well, the story continues. So finally, we'll jump ahead because, unfortunately, again, not a lot of information about everything that took place over those 150 years. But let's jump to the end. So finally, in the year 2649, at the end, at the Battle of Lethur, I think it's Ileuthar, Lethur,
Close enough.
I mumble over it. Anyway, so after 5 days of battling hordes of ice demons, Valandor the Great was close to collapsing, and then all of a sudden, Winter appeared to him. Valandor and Winter kind of battled hand to hand with the occasional use of magic and kind of just fighting throughout. And then eventually, Valandor, because as I said before, he was biding his time, waiting for that moment to fight Winter, to confront Winter and fight her. He ended up managed to get the upper hand and got a knife and essentially shoved his blade into her, and then all of a sudden she shattered in a fury of ice shards, and there was a blinding flash. Now, after all that subsided, there was a big laughter that happened, and it was that moment that Valdor realized that her physical form had essentially vanished, but she had actually bound herself into the ice that was left. And all of a sudden, all the ice started to melt. So her plan essentially was to flood everything and basically wipe everyone off by just flooding everything and massive tsunamis and so forth. So all of a sudden, all the ice around that had frozen everything had started to melt. Now Valdor was essentially panicked by this and raced to actually stop all the flooding, and he diverted as much ice as he could. And essentially, that's how we got what we call now the infancy. So if you look at the map, you see that very kind of, not really spider web, but a spider-looking thing. That's what happened after the floods. So Valdor went everywhere, tried to hold back. He tried to save Elven home with the home of the owls by making a big wall and holding them off. He tried to save the great kingdom of Prime Mangathor?
Yeah.
Primathor, whatever that kingdom's called.
Primavantor?
That's it. That's the one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Terrible names. Yeah, try to save them as well, and that's why that kingdom is so much smaller nowadays than it was at the time, because this flood was flooding everything. And unfortunately, based off everything he was doing, he eventually lost his life by trying to hold back all the flood. And this is one of the few documented cases of a Shining One actually dying. Now, what happened to Winter? Not sure. All we know is that everything kind of subsided all the way to the north, to now that we know of the Northlands up there, or Northern Guard, I believe it's called. Whether Winter is still alive or not, it's kind of implied that she is, that she never actually died, she just infused herself in the ice, managed to use her magic to melt everything up until that point and flood everything. But that's why we've got so much of the old world flooded, and so that's why we ended up with the infancy. That's why a lot of factions got split. It's why the halflings also got split, because around this time, right before the Winter's War, the Shires were first founded, but then the Winter's War happened, froze over, and then the Infancy was created, and so there was a big contingent of halflings that were stuck on the other side of the Infancy at EJ, and that's where you get all the balloons, all those crafts, all the balloon crafts, and the jetpacks. They actually come from EJ there, because they used a lot of the science they learned from the elves. Or I think they're kind of mixed bag with the elf science and their own science, and that's how they're created. But that's how the split. So a lot of races were quite impacted by this, and so you got the Grand Republic, Prime Venator. They were kind of split and brought down a lot smaller. That was a little bit of the origins of the Basilia. That's how Basilia kind of started to become what we know them today, is because of this kind of huge reduction of influence that Republic now has. Elvenhome was quite destroyed as well. They lost a lot of forests, and a lot of magic. Everything kind of got swamped as well. Their capital as well kind of was shrunk, but it was protected by giant walls now, and that's why it is now protected by giant. I think they changed the name of it, and can't remember for the life of me what they used to be called.
Wall Deep was I always know.
Yeah, it was called Wall Deep after this event. I think it was called Thurnerina
Adar. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what it was called originally, and now it was called Wall Deep, is what they call it, because they basically didn't move the city. They just built big walls around it so that it stops the sea from flooding the city. So that was
hundreds of feet high too. Those are some walls.
Yeah.
So
and so that was part of what Valdor was trying to do and trying to save, because even though the winter was all the ice was melting, it wasn't instant. So they did have time to build things and so forth. And so they lost a lot of people, essentially died and flooded. The dwarfs, they lost a lot because it was right in the middle of their territory, so a lot of their halls got flooded, and essentially the dwarfs locked themselves away from everywhere else. They're kind of very bitter about the whole thing, and they kind of hid themselves away for many years before they started to come out again a couple of centuries later. Now, that was just all the kind of what we know from the Green Book. So they called it the Great Indonation. Inundation. But also known as Winter's Last Gift. So it's called both things. A lot of people refer it to as Winter's Last Gift because it was kind of her last gift, in quotations, a little bit of a curse on the world. Now, what we did learn, though, in the Clash of Kings 2024 book is when all this happened, the Twilight Kin, it basically opened a lot of opportunities for the Twilight Kin. So before they went next to a big sea, the infancy didn't exist, so they didn't really have access to be able to capture new slaves or had to do everything land-based. The minute the infancy created, they saw an opportunity, so they sent out all these boats to the furthest reaches of what they could reach, basically, and started kidnapping a lot more people so they could use them as kind of cattle for experiments into the void. Because before they were using weak kind of slaves, they didn't really have a lot of access, but all of a sudden now they had the infancy there, they could go over and actually just capture new halflings. They could capture a lot of different races to use them for part of the experiments. What also it meant is they actually sent boats out to new kingdoms and new territories. So we actually had the Twilight Kin establish, they call them emissaries in the Ixan Empire, Ixali Empire, so Xirkaali Empire. Xerxes?
Zerkali, something like
Zirkali.
that.
Zirkali
Yeah,
sounds right.
I'm just
Zirkali
guessing.
Empire.
So
Z-
we'll
no,
call him
Zirkali makes
X.
sense.
We'll
We'll call
call
him
him
X,
X.
X Empire, yes. Zayan, which is a faction. Well, a faction, I don't know. It is. I'm going to call it a faction because it does feel like something that Mantic has been hinting at, because that wasn't the first time that they've been mentioned. They were also mentioned in the Armada books as well, of them of an empire in the east moving west as well. So it feels like that might be something we will see in the future, maybe with 4th edition. We also had them contact the Tezimo Surrogate, which in Yamato.
Tetsuma. I'm going to say Tetsumo Shogunate.
You're so much better at this than me.
I don't know. Who knows if I'm doing it right? So
exactly. It sounds way better than my mumbling. So so they established emissaries in those two kingdoms, which we don't know much about. We know that they're not really established whether it's a city or it's a region, but they established an embassy in Yamato, which could be, it could be a city. We're not quite sure. All we know is we'll call them TS. We'll call them TS. TS is a vampiric. So vampire, so some undead vampire, kind of samurais. It sounds like it kind of hints at that kind of thing. So that'd be really cool if we do actually get like vampire samurais. I think that would be a nice direction for the world to go into. But that's in the east, and there's a lot about the east we don't know. They also managed to explore the ruins of Kong. Don't know what that is. And Murgahal, which again, they're just random names that are thrown into the book that we don't actually know a lot about. But it also hints that we do have some plans of going somewhere that we haven't been before.
Here's where I put in my speculation for the 4th edition launch box, or the 2-player set, and you will get a force of X and a force of TS battling it out in the east, opening up new realms as we open up a new edition of Kings of War. So there's my speculation for you.
Yeah, that would be really cool. And those two empires are noted as being beside each other. So the TS being east of X, and X being closer to what we know as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. They'll be mentioning it more and more, and we're now getting an idea that the Twilight Kin have actually been in contact with them. Well, we're looking at nearly 1,000 years already. So it's quite interesting to know that there's been 1,000 years of contact with the Twilight Kin. Does that mean they're on their side? They have an emissary set up. You like to think they are, but I mean, who knows? Who knows? It also notes that there were many underground channels that opened up because of the flooding as well. So it must have opened up a lot of underground kind of streams and ways. And one species they actually came across was the Murlocs, so Mhurloks, which is a dwarf-like beings whose profane technology defied every magic known to the elves. So it looks like we might have some underground dwarfs that are messing around with some very interesting magic.
So interesting thought is that we're culling the current crop of races, but we could be adding some so that maybe we'll equal out to where we're at now at about 30.
Maybe. Yeah, it's hinting something. So if we do get those two, I mean,
well, Murlocs would be great too. I mean, they're bestial dwarf-like beings. I mean, you just came up with 3 new races. So,
exactly.
The herd goes away, and, we can think of a couple others. Ratkin slaves, everybody wants to get rid of them. So even though the models are available, so it shouldn't go away, but
they would stand out. Obviously, they'll be unique and stand out, and I think that's the key. If you are going to introduce new factions, make sure it's factions that seem unique and that will make Kings of War a little bit more attractive to people that can't get this army anywhere else but Kings of War. I think that's important, but it's also worth noting that they introduced this 2 years ago as well. So if they are introducing these factions, they put some thought into it, which is reassuring because we obviously don't want them just to come up with something on the fly. If they've been cooking this, if they've been experimenting with it, it means when we finally get some kind of announcement, we're probably not just going to get one model. We're going to get a good chunk of models of good lore, good molds, and there's so much potential, especially if they've been cooking it for a while. So hopefully they explore more of it, but it also could be just a line they threw in, hoping one day to explore more on it.
It could be, but you look at GW, they just opened up the East and just opened up the I want to call it the Jade Empire, but I know that that's not the name of it.
Oh, I know the one you're talking about. Yeah, the Cathay.
Cathay, yeah, Grand Cathay, yeah. Ruled by the Eternal Emperor Dragon or something like that. But they just released all the models. They all got the word Jade in them, so that's why I can't get that out of my head. But so that they introduced an entire new faction, brand new models, the whole 9 yards. So it wouldn't surprise me that we're going east in Pannithor and getting some new races. So and like I said, maybe fill it. We may lose some, but the reason we're losing them is to expand the game and fill in the ranks with some new Mantic exclusive models.
Exactly, and I mean, I know we're very doom and gloom about it, but Mantic can always change. They can always release these new factions, reduce the factions, but then, and they have historically done this as well, come up with uncharted empires and reintroduce factions. Like the Ratkin. The Ratkin were in 2nd edition, but when 3rd edition first came out, they weren't included, and they were reintroduced with Uncharted Empires, which came out, I think, a year or two after 3rd edition launched. And I'm not quite sure whether that was always the plan or whether they would just listen to feedback and introduce them. So factions may go, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're gone forever. So you never know. We could end up with 50 different factions, and as long as it's all balanced and it all works well on the table, that would be the dream. I know that would be a pipe dream, but that would be the dream. So we never know what will happen. But we've got teasing. And if it turns out these factions end up being in 4th edition, at least we can say we called it first and we've got some kind of documented podcast on it.
There you go.
Sorry, I'm pausing for a breath. Anyway, now, so the war's over. Valador is dead. We now do have, we don't know if Winter's dead. We also know the Infant Sea now exists, and now we've got more people sailing and getting on the seas and all that. So after her defeat, all the ice kind of retreated back to the north where it started from, and the it's noted that the 9 richest provinces that existed were now just wiped clean, and essentially the world was a little bit reset, and new factions kind of arose. Humanity never rose to the strength that they used to be. They kind of all faded away, kind of fractured into their own countries that we know. Basilia is probably the strongest now human faction, but it did take a few years for that to happen. Dwarfs eventually came back out, but they did eventually split into free dwarfs and dwarfs around about the year 3000, and a lot of that was got to do with their isolation and this, staying away from other races and just being a little bit more snobbish and just wanting to do their own thing. Because the free dwarfs, a lot of people forget, the free dwarfs were really independent clans. Free dwarfs wasn't really a faction. It was that they were independent until they got pushed out of Harpy, and then when they come back to Harpy, they're more unified. So yeah, it kind of changed the world in a very, very big way, with the notable Infant Sea being the biggest one. Now, the Infant Sea also did open the doors for the Trident Realms, who had been hiding in the Endless Sea over to the west. They were still hidden out there. They actually started to now establish colonies within the Infant Sea, which previously didn't exist, so they couldn't. And that's why we get Trident Realms being a more active player in the world. And so that essentially is the story of the Winter's War. Now, there are a few questions. Is what happened to Winter? We don't really know. The kind of theory, or the theory that I've crafted, is that Winter used a lot of her remaining magic to melt all the sea up to a point, but she managed to hide away up north somewhere, and her sister, if she is called Aurora, has been trying to keep her at bay to some degree. Not entirely sure, but that's my kind of theory. There's also a question of why didn't the Shining Ones actually help? I mean, they had 2,000, we'll round it, 2,500 years to recover from the God War, but they refused to help. And what happened after Winter's War that made them such to be seen as gods again, because you would have thought there'd be a lot of bitterness of the fact of only one Shining One. Maybe it was the sacrifice of Veldor that made them go, hey, we can't just sit on the sidelines all the time. We've seen all the death that it's caused. Let's just start, getting out there and fighting the forces of evil. Maybe that this is what was the reason why they did the death of one of their own. Who knows? Actually, I'll chuck it to you, Mark, on that one. What's your theory of why the rest of the Shining Ones didn't actually help during this war?
Well, I mean, there is no real direct theory that you can derive from any of the existing lore, but maybe they. I mean, if you think about it, the Abyss sat it out too. It was just winter, so maybe they just equalized things and said, you know what, if we're on there, we'll just defeat it that much easier. The Abyss is locked away, so what the heck, we'll sit on the sidelines too and see what our children in the world, what the noble races can do without us. Maybe they just sat off on the sideline and ate popcorn and watched the action.
Yeah, Veldor would have been pissed. It was like, hey guys, could you help us? They're like, no, we're good. You're doing great, though. Good on you.
But Valandor, but he was there, so, and I mean, his aspect, but everybody else is gone. So,
it's a hard one. We don't know. Go, mate, sorry.
Yeah, it's just, I just think that they decided to sit it out. You think about it, it's like the Green Lady, it's neutral. So, sometimes good is going right. So they got to support the bad to equalize the, equalize the good to get it back to neutral. So that's the only thing I can think of is they just kind of, leveled the playing field, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it could be just a case of also they maybe didn't want to lose more power, that they risked that joining the war at their depowered state would risk some of them actually passing away and dying, so there's even fewer of them. Or it also could be just the fact of they're just so, even after 2,000 years, they're just so demoralized by the destruction and the pain that they've caused that they want to stay out of it because they're worried about making things worse. It could be, there's so many different reasons, and this is why, I mean, this is partly why we're making this episode, is that there is an opportunity here to make a book on it, or a story on it. And I know that we've got Rise of Celestians, we're getting Fall of Celestians, which covers the mirror smashing, and then possibly if we get a third book in that, we'll cover the God War. This is a potential fourth book of essentially, epilogue of that trilogy of the Winter's War, and why are they so revered now? But at their time, they stayed out of this conflict. The biggest conflict that caused some of the most, even more than the God War, this caused a lot of destruction. Is why did they stay out of it? I think it's a really good opportunity of dealing with that, and also show why they became so revered. Because all these Shining Ones, they have temples built of them. I think there was a line somewhere that in Goldenhorn, the capital of Basileia, they've made temples for every single Shining One. Why would you make temples for every single Shining One if they just left the noble races to fight for themselves when they could easily have come and helped? And so many people died, and so many people got flooded and drowned. So there is so much more that we don't know. But I also think it's actually rather exciting to know if one day someone could come and write it all down, and we'll learn about it, because I think it's a really good story, especially for Veldor, who he probably has a lot of guilt, because he's in Rise of Celestians, it shows that he cares quite a lot, and I think having his wicked half being Belial, and he managed to lock him up. And for the record, the reason why Veldor does show in the Dungeon Saga is because that's a spirit of him. It's like his final essence there that he granted, and that's why he can appear. But it could be could be some kind of connection there. I don't know. It's quite there's so much of the story we don't know. I guess that last bit is, what was Winter's grand plan? Just to flood everything? Was to freeze over everything and flood everything? Because she took a long time to do it, and she waited until she actually got defeated to flood it. So, and why did she wait so long? Why did she wait 2,500 years to do this plan as well? So there's a lot we don't know. Yeah.
Well, maybe it took her 2,500 years to build up her power.
Possibly, yeah.
She had to go from first level to 50th level before she could pull it off, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, she had to build up her power reserve so she could pull it off. But that was her grand scheme at the end of the day. But I think that the flood and stuff like that is kind of like the crystal pendant. It's like. My grand plan is to freeze everything because I'm Winter. So I'm Elsa. I'm going to have a great time in my winter wonderland. But if you screw with me, that's the end of it. It's all going to melt and I'm going to flood everybody out. So, that's my backup plan. And then, I'm winning either way, so to speak. So with the person who won the Winter War was Winter either way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But now, every time I think of Winter, now I'm going to think of Elsa from Frozen. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
There you go. Actually, that is not too bad. Yeah. So we can use Elsa to fill in for Winter. So, but
yes,
I think it would be great. And I agree with you. I really am looking forward to some stories in this. I just think it's a fascinating part of the history of Pannithor that we've just heard about. And again, you dug out every kernel of information you could from across all the available lore. And, it's a pretty decent wiki page, but there's so many more stories to be told. And the other exciting thing, like I mentioned before, is there's new units in here. It gives you the opportunity to do other things. So I just, fascinating.
And also
very cool.
It is noted that a lot of these kingdoms that got flooded were never seen again. So, I mean, there could be a lot of races as well that are smaller population that just no longer exist. A lot of animals as well. So there's a lot of potential for things to be introduced into the world of Pannithor that no longer exists here. Or it could be just a case of in other places of the world, there's a lot of those kind of races. But here there was only a small pocket which ended up getting defeated when Winter kind of froze everything over because they don't survive in the winter. I mean, it's just as simple as that. Of there are a lot of races that can't survive winter, and this could have been, what caused them to die off. But in other parts of the world, they exist because, keep in mind, the known map that we have is only like in the northern hemisphere. There is a lot to the south. I think it's hinted that we kind of are seeing just the tip of the equator from the known map that we have. So there's a lot down south that we don't actually know. So there's a lot of races that could exist. So a lot of potential. All we're saying is a lot of potential, and also a lot of campaigns that could be shown during this time, which I'm looking forward to. So I'm pretty much covered everything I wanted to there. Do you have anything you wanted to add there, Mark? My voice it's very coarse.
Oh, there you go. Well, I'm glad. Hopefully, everyone has enjoyed this little dive into the War with Winter. It was kind of my request, so I thank Dave for digging into it and putting this together. And hopefully, dear listener, you have enjoyed it as much as I have. So.
Yeah, I'm glad because I mean we want to do more of these events. So it'd be good to start painting the world as being as lived in as we know it is. So if you have any ideas of what event you want us to cover, whether it's Dungeon Saga, whether you actually just want us to go through the entire timeline in a very kind of abridged way of touching on into the modern day, and we can cover on a lot of events that don't get talked about quite a lot. We're more than happy because we just want to get the lore out there because it's a lot richer than people give it credit for. And I think it deserves the credit there. But yeah, that's about it. But before we leave it there, we will read out a comment that we got on YouTube because some people leave comments there, and we want to give the love there because they took the effort to actually mention it. So we've only got one here, so we'll go for it really quick. And this is by Adrian Scott, and a big shout out to Adrian. I think he's always there at the live premiere of the podcast on YouTube, and he's always willing to chat. So if you're keen, make sure you put the little notification button on the YouTube and actually join him on the day and have a good chat about lore, because he's definitely there, and it's really great to see. Adrian said on a previous episode, great episode as usual. Actually, this is actually referring to the podcast that we did with Mark Barber about Through Thick and Thin, and we talked about alignments, about their use in Kings of War. And he said, regarding the good/evil alignments in Kings of War, I thought about this so here's my 2 cents. I think the best way of it is not so much whether it's a given fact. Let me rephrase this. I think the best way to think of it, not so much whether a given faction is good or evil, but whether they align themselves with the shining ones or the wicked ones. In this way, you don't need to consider the subjective nature of good versus evil, e.g. Basileans may do evil things, but they worship the shining ones, which makes them a good faction by default. The neutral factions are then factions that have no allegiance to the wicked ones or shining ones, or are aligned with or they are aligned with both. So they could be neutral, but they love the shining ones and the wicked ones. So, for instance, if the Trident Realms would count towards the former, despite their constant war against the forces of the Abyss, then the Green Lady's existence as a combination of both Shining One and Wicked One is what makes nature and nature-aligned factions being neutral. I hope that makes sense. So, basically, to summarize there, instead of saying good, neutral, or evil, we go from Shining Ones, neutral, and wicked ones. So what do you think about that approach there, Mark?
Well, it's fairly valid. So, I don't think the good is limited strictly, or the bad is, limited strictly to the shining ones and the wicked ones, but they're certainly the leaders of the band.
I mean, the Vanguard is classified as an evil faction, but they don't like the wicked ones either. They are the old gods. No, I think not Bannock. It's
Korgon.
Korgoth. That's it. The god of the air. So he's like So under that definition, I think this is where the flaw is. Sorry to poke holes in it, Adrian. Is they would be technically neutral because they wouldn't go with either of them. They would go for this old god. So I completely get your point, and the argument of like all factions are kind of influenced by the shining and wicked ones. I think all factions have been molded due to the wicked ones or the shining ones. And molded doesn't necessarily mean they follow one. It's just they have been influenced by an action of a wicked one, such as the Varga is influenced because of Celestians kicked their butts and kind of got them out of the main Pannithor region. So a really good point, though. Very good point.
Yeah, something else to mention is that, while we're talking about this, is kind of one of the things that I noticed is one of the trends is you're so good, you're bad in, Kings of War lore. And, so right now Basileia is one of those, they're so good, they're bad. And the other one, which is a little surprise for me, is the dwarfs. I mean, they're kind of, there's an argument that they're going from good to bad, so, and I'm not spoiling any stories here, but, so very interesting. But yeah, it's just kind of, and then of course, the halflings left the League of Rordia and stuff like that. So, it's like, it's just an interesting trend I see, so anytime you see good slapped on a faction, think about it twice.
Yeah.
Particularly in this world.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a good thing because it leads to storytelling. It means you're not pigeonholed of these characters. This race is always good. It's not. So it's interesting to see where they go with the alignment because I know it does play a factor of what's on the table, but they do that more for gameplay. Are they going to start to? Because I mean, a lot of people wonder like why Salamander is defined as good, and that still hasn't really been defined much. So. Cool. Well, thanks for your comment there, Adrian. And if you want your comment yourselves to be read on or just want a discussion point, just flick a message on YouTube or join us on the Discord as well. Or send an email to kingsofwarwiki.com. Oh, sorry, no, kingsofwar at gmail.com. Also join our Facebook, and also we've got Instagram, and we've got Patreon if you want to chuck us a buck to help us produce more MUP content. I'm kind of slowly trying to wrap things up. Mark, do you have any final words for us?
No final words. Again, thank you so much for joining us on this little deep dive. And again, Dave, thank you so much. This is a little passion project for me, so
No worries,
but I
mate.
appreciate you doing so hard, and I hope everyone enjoyed it, because I really do think this is one of the most fascinating parts of the lore for Pannithor, and I'm hoping that we get it fleshed out and we get a novel on it. Or a series of novels. I just think there's so much here and so much potential, and it's so influential in the current situation in Pannithor. I mean, it literally, caused the world to be the way it is today. It's really the formation point. So it's kind of like the Big Bang, so to speak, for Pannithor.
100%. And so Wayne thinks that was a really good note to leave on there, Mark. And I actually just got a message from Brandon literally right now. So right now, as we're recording this, Adepticon is going on right now. And he just told me that this has been their best Mantic con for sure. And it's crazy how much the books are selling. So lore is definitely rising in the world of Pannithor, and feel free to jump on board with us as well.
You got it. Selling like hotcakes.
Exactly. Whatever hotcakes are. Anyway, until next time, everybody. See ya.
Take care.